Good afternoon and welcome to session 13 of the Business School Leaders Forum, brought to you by GoToWebinar by LogMeIn. Today I'm joined by Chris Dixon, Head of IT Partnering and Innovation at Lancaster University, and Alan Goody, Chief Digital Officer and Professor of Marketing at Neon Business School, who will be presenting case studies on digital innovation at business schools. In a moment, I'm going to pass over to Chris, but before I do, we'll have a joint Q&A session at the end. So if you've got any questions throughout the presentations, please feel free to type these into the question tab, and hopefully we'll get a chance to answer all of them at the end. So I won't take any more time. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Chris.
Well, good afternoon from the UK, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you about digital technology. I'm coming live, in fact, from Lancaster University, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about some voice and chat technology that we've recently launched and has gone down really well with students. And I'm going to introduce you to our voice skill, which we call LU. LU, of course, being short for Lancaster University, and that's kind of how the students know us. And that's our voice and chat digital assistant. Just a little bit about Lancaster to start off with. We're a top 10 UK university. We have about 17,000 students and about 3,000 staff. And as well as having a beautiful campus just north of Manchester and close to the Lake District in the UK, we also have a number of international partnerships, which you can see on the screen. I think of Lancaster, people usually say we punch above our weight. I don't know if that's quite the right phrase, but we were University of the Year in 2018 and International University of the Year this year in 2020. And we like here to be on the forefront of technology, and that's really why we chose to introduce a voice and chat skill. Why voice and chat? Well, this to me is one of the most compelling statistics. Humans can talk at 150 words a minute, but can only type at 40. And actually, if we can get the voice and chat interaction working well, then we can achieve real efficiency savings. I'm sure you've all had historical experiences of using voice technology that have maybe not been so good, but I think now the technology is at a tipping point. I'm sure if I asked you who is using Amazon Alexas and Google Homes to go about their day-to-day life, I'd get quite a few virtual hands up. If we look at the marketplace, we can see a number of pointers that indicate that this is a technology that's on the move. Gartner, which is an IT think tank, told us that 30% of all searches will be done without a screen by this year. Google say that people who own a smart speaker, so a Google Home or an Amazon Alexa, just less than half of them say that it feels like talking to a friend or another person. And we thought that that was really quite an interesting statistic. 55% of teenagers are using voice search on a daily basis. And of course, in our business schools, in our universities, the teenagers are going to be the students of tomorrow, and they are going to expect this kind of technology to be working. So my role here at Lancaster, I work and lead an innovation team, and we develop new digital technologies. And part of our role is looking towards the future and thinking about what technologies we're going to need. And this next slide really sums up for me the reasons why voice and chat make so much sense. This picture on the right-hand side, a little bit amusing, but my niece, who was about 4 years old at the time, was so confident with using their Amazon Alexa device that they'd added some very interesting items to their parents' shopping list. So these were our reasons around doing a voice project. It should be faster and easier to use your voice than to type or use an app. You can actually save some money, you can make efficiency gains. There's some really compelling examples. I love the Domino's Pizza app. I don't know how many of you have used it, but their innovation was that they know your credit card number, they know where you live, and they know your favorite pizza. So on your smart speaker, you simply say, hey, order me a Domino's, and knock, 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 the delivery driver arrives. And there's loads of examples where businesses have seen really great return on investment. Fairly simple and cheap to develop these kind of voice technologies, but can give you a real compelling place in the market. As we saw from the statistics and my silly example there, students are comfortable with voice. In fact, they're coming to expect that a university, a business school develops a voice skill. And the other thing for Lancaster was it enables us to build a foundation to use other cloud services, because these technologies are deployed in the cloud, and that makes them easy to build. So there were our reasons. How did we go about it? Well, the first thing we did is actually took a leaf out of Amazon's book. Amazon Web Services were a partner with us on this project. They have a thing called Start with the Press Release. I love cutting through all of the faff and fluff that we normally get inside our universities and actually writing down a press release as it would appear in the national press when we release the skill. And actually what I've superimposed on top of this slide is an article from the Times newspaper in the UK. And actually, even though we took a relatively small amount of time, so around 90 days to deliver this skill, we could look back at the press release that we'd written and see the press release that we actually delivered, and there wasn't too much difference between them, which I felt was really good. So we took the press release rather than the traditional business case to the university. We decided that we were going to work with Amazon and we were going to develop it in their cloud platform. And we asked the university for a relatively small amount of money, about £50,000. Actually, it took longer to get the money out of the university into our accounts so we could start paying our developers than it did to develop the overall products. And I wonder if that sometimes says something about the pace of change in certain institutions. But then we were off, and we run an agile development team. And so this is how we went in just 120 days from zero to LUs, our skill, which I'll hopefully have a chance to show you live as well. So we started off, as many innovations do, by developing a prototype. We wrote a really simple voice skill. All it would do was tell you when the next bus from the campus into town was. That was it. But that generated quite a bit of excitement. We started talking to people about how they could use a voice skill. We wrote that press release and we got the money. That was March 18. Fast forward till November, when the university had finally decided to convert that into pounds and pence in our bank account, and we could start developing. The first thing we did is we wrote out to our audience, to our students, and we sent them a simple one-question survey. And we said, what would you like to ask a chatbot? And we got some very interesting responses back, but there was a lot of stuff around their academic journey, their grades, their progression. There was a lot of stuff around campus life. How do I get to places? When are things open? So we put them into a number of different themes and we programmed them into development sprints. We then started by building out the infrastructure that we needed in the cloud by applying security. One of the really important things about our voice bot is that it knows who the student is so that it can give them personalized results. And so we built out that security infrastructure so that it would work with our single sign-on system. And then we started building in functionality. So we started off with things like academic events. When is my next lecture? When's my next event? When are things due? So students are very keen to know about their deadlines. And we also started to build in this idea of personalization, this tantalizing idea that the virtual assistant, the voice, the chat could actually be your friend. So friendly greetings, something with a little bit of humor in. And we actually spent quite a bit of time wrestling with exactly how to do that in a really useful way. Next, we built in Q&A. We took an approach where really we wanted to have answers derived from data that we held rather than question and answers that we had to maintain. But there were some simple question and answers that we needed to build in. So we built a platform for that so that other users at the university that weren't developers could update those questions. We linked to university events. We also recognised from our survey that there were some student groups that wouldn't really be represented in numerical terms in a survey, but they were super important. And one of those was students with a disability. So we built in special features, special question and answers, and included people with a disability. In fact, we had one student that was blind. I included them in our test program so that we could get some real valuable feedback from them. The next sprint, we've started linking to exam information so students can look up which seat they've been allocated in the exam. We also realised that we could get a lot of mileage from linking staff services in there as well for not a lot of extra development. So for example, the student might want to know when their next lecture is, but a lecturer might want to know when their next class is and which students they have. So with very little development, we were able to refocus and introduce some services for staff. Finally, we started to link up to a whole bunch of other data sources, information on opening times. We actually had to create a system for authoritative data as we didn't have any opening times that we could rely on. Things like when computers are available, when washers and dryers are free, what books the student has in the library. And we also started to integrate it. So this started off as an Alexa voice skill, but we wanted to integrate it into our mobile phone platform and into our web platform as well. Time was almost up on our 120-day challenge. So we finished by looking at how we can use cards, which are extra pieces of information that appear on devices with a screen. So you may have seen the Alexa speakers that also have a screen on them. Sprinkle in a little bit of magic, deployment, a lot of testing to make sure that it worked. And we were done. So within 120 days of development time, we'd gone from no knowledge of the cloud platform and no code existing to having our fully launched voice skill. And we had a nice press launch, invited Amazon and launched it to all of the student population. How did we do it? Important to us really is working with students. So although we have 3 full-time developers, we also employed students. They help us code, they help us design, they do every aspect of the process really. And we also employed a new role, which is a conversation specialist. Developing for voice is actually a little bit different than developing, say, a web app or a mobile phone app, because there's so many ways that a student or a member of staff can ask and phrase the same question. And so we employed a student with experience from our linguistics department to help us build that out. Student involvement's also really key throughout the whole process. And this slide just really demonstrates the 4 different ways that we try to engage students in different kinds of dialogue. So just for example, we had over 100 beta users where we gave devices and we allowed them to have early releases. So every 20 days they were getting new features. We were also engaging with students via social media platforms and via things like focus groups and the student union as a representative body of the students. So all of that allowed us to rapidly evolve the products as we went and hopefully end up with something that's really useful for the students. So now I'm just going to fire up Amazon Alexa. As I mentioned, it's an Alexa skills app on my phone, and hopefully we'll just have a little chat to LU and you can see some of the things it does. So I hope you're able to hear this. Open LU.
Hi, welcome back to LU. I can help with questions about your timetable, your deadlines or your exams. What would you like to know?
What's my student ID?
Your student ID is 00411103. What can I help you with next?
Is it going to rain?
The weather forecast is for scattered clouds. The temperature is 18 Celsius. How else can I help you?
What is the phone number for Chris Dixon?
You can call Chris Dixon from Information Systems Services on +44 1524 510167. How else can I help you?
How many computers are free in the library?
It looks like there are currently 149 computers free. How else can I help you?
Research the distance between the Earth and the Moon.
The distance from Earth to the Moon at 14:15 Irish Standard Time, Monday the 22nd of June 2020 is about 383,283 kilometers. What else can I help you with?
That's everything, thank you. Bye.
Have a good afternoon, Brian.
So hopefully that gives you a flavour of just some of the things that our LU skill can do. So it works inside our Lancaster mobile phone app, which well over 99% of students have. It works across all of the Alexa smart speaker family, including speakers with screens where you can get additional information. We've also embedded it into some of the other tools that we use, so Microsoft Teams and also our student web portal for those who use that. And we've also played around with using it as a kind of VR character, so actually putting a face to the chatbot. And we've trialed that in things like a student welcome week, so that they can ask specific sets of questions and they can come up to a kind of big screen and have an experience which is a lot more like talking to a person. And I've only been able to give you a flavour of some of the things that it can do. Some of the more complicated examples it can do. It can, for example, handle room bookings so that you can see the availability and book rooms. So it can do transactional things as well. Around different audiences, new students tell us that sometimes they have information that they don't want to ask because they're embarrassed. So they can ask about what college they're in, their student ID, which we saw, information about how many credits modules are worth and where they're going next. Existing students already know some of that information, so they tend to use more of the complicated features. They can ask about their grades, and we've actually built in some security protection there to stop their grades being read out to other people. They can do bookings. They can also do research, as you saw me there, researching the distance from the Earth to the Moon, and get information about deadlines and exams. Disabled students told us that having an actual voice coming from a speaker was something that was really powerful for them, and that was really nice working on the project. But there's a lot of information about how they can get support, how they can access inclusive learning plans and things like that. I'll build this slide because we've not got a lot of time, but this is a little bit of information as to how it actually works. You can see at the top left, this is a user coming in through our Lancaster mobile app. At the top right, they could also be coming in through an Amazon Alexa mobile device. And there's two pieces of technology. So on the right, the Alexa Skills Kit, and on the left, Lex. And what they really do is try and understand the intent of what the user is saying. We call them intents. So when I'm asking, for example, what's coming up next, my intent is to find out about my timetable, and I could ask that in a number of different ways. Both of those technologies talk to some serverless code, which is what this AWS Lambda is in the middle, and that makes sure that you've got all the information. So for example, if I'm booking the room, I probably need to know how many people it's for, what day it's for, and I might need to know other information. So there might be a back and forth while I go and gather information off the user. Once I've got all that information, it's passed through the API gateway, which takes us from the cloud to our local systems and services here at Lancaster. We perform a lookup, and then, as you saw in the demo, we're able to go back and present that information back to the user and the answer that they need. And that's supported as well by a whole bunch of other services. So we can look at how the skill is performing, we can get some information on who's using it and get various metrics and things like that. And actually, some of this cloud technology has been really simple to pick up. A lot of our developers, in fact, all of them, had not used this technology stack before. But by the end of the project, they were, after the 120 days, we had a fully deployed skill and they were up to speed with using the technology. One of the questions, and again, not too much time to go into so much detail on this, but one of the questions is about how we authenticated it, because the user can use an app that they've already authenticated to, or they can use an Alexa device. And the takeaway here is that you can use both your on-site provider of identity, we call that a SAML provider, so think of a single sign-on system, or you can, if the user's not used the app before, you can go and kind of create them an identity. Very happy to talk to people if they want some more information technically on that. People also ask about publicity. We took a multi-factor approach really with publicising it. We used our electronic screens around campus to promote it to our students. We used kind of pull-up advertising, and we even took over the advertising space on the screensavers around the university to really get the message out and get people to start using the skill. The other thing we did is we took case studies, so where people had found it really useful and interesting, and we publicized that as well, so that students were getting a view that other students were finding it useful. So hopefully that's given you a whistle-stop overview of everything that we've achieved, and I think really we've achieved a huge amount. It's providing really useful stuff for students, and they're really pleased with a lot of the skill. But we didn't stop when we launched it. And also we've got plans for what to do next. So since launch, we added in recorded and summarized lecturer feedback. So when you ask for your grade, if the lecturer has left feedback in our virtual learning environment, it will be able to read that out, either as the lecturer's voice, if they've recorded it, or as text read out. We've integrated with Panopto, which is our lecture capture system, in order to do playback and search. So you can, for example, say, tell me where my tutor mentioned entrepreneurship, and it will fast forward you to that particular point and play it back, either with audio on a speaker or with video if you're on a device with a screen. We've integrated into a whole bunch of extra endpoints, including the telephone. So even if you don't have the internet, you can ring up the skill and talk to it over the phone. So loads and loads of work, and we're continuing to evolve and improve it. In terms of the future, where's this technology going? Using some of the machine learning to make interventions to students could be a really powerful thing. So, you know, perhaps if a student is struggling, we can suggest them texts that they might read. We can suggest lectures that they may be able to watch and specific content. We're also playing with this idea of a digital friend for students. So maybe if a student has welfare needs, if they're feeling sad, they can have an interaction with our bot, and maybe if they need to, we can connect them really simply and easily to a real human friend. We've also attracted a lot of interest from our organisation's staff. When they saw the room booking example for students, their first response was, well, when are we getting this for all the rest of the rooms around campus? So we're looking into that. And also for students who don't have a device, we're wondering about the possibility of putting a smart speaker device into their rooms. They're not hugely expensive. You may be talking 20 or 30 pounds, dollars, in order to put devices into rooms. So that's another thing that we're looking into. So as I say, it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I hope you've enjoyed meeting LU and seeing all of the things that it can do. I look forward to addressing some of your questions at the end. But now I'll hand back to Paul.
Hello everyone, sorry about that. I just had a few technical issues. So I'll now pass over to Alan, who will be able to go into the second presentation. Over to you, Alan.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. I'm Alain Goudet, Chief Digital Officer from Neoma Business School, and I'm also a marketing professor and doing research on sensory marketing and consumer behavior, and also on the acceptance of disruptive technologies and innovation adoption. Normally, a couple of years ago, I was used to say that the world is changing, and basically the idea today is that the world has already changed. And imagine that if you are using tools or concepts or maps to help your students to find their way on this map, of course, you will find your way within the different continents and the different seas, but the world today is much more like this one, with all these digital platforms and digital tools available. And we do believe at Neoma Business School that we need to educate our students to understand that new world around these new continents and oceans of data. The other thing that leads us on this digital transformation of the business school is to try to help our students to avoid disruption. You, of course, know the Kodak effects, that effect from the leader on the market that that could disappear within a couple of years because he wasn't able to adapt to the new rules of the market. We need to face this disruption process for our students in order to help them to avoid that Kodak effects on their future markets. But we also need to avoid these disruption effects on our side as organizations. Because as I say quite often, I do believe that our biggest threats in terms of competition is not necessarily on the education market right now, but is much more on all these digital startups and all these GAFA companies. And they are providing a lot of digital tools that could be very helpful for the education. So the other thing is that we need to accompany our students on the right professional trajectories. And this is very hard because in terms of HR, the future years are going to be very risky with a lot of changes concerning the jobs. Because, of course, we got a high risk of job replacement through automation, through AI. And this is changing a lot within different countries. And it really depends on the job markets, on each country, but even on each city. On the slide, you can see that percentage are evolving a lot regarding the cities on the US market. So we need to put all of this to think about our digital transformation as a business school. And I do believe that the greatest danger in these times of very high turbulence, it's not the turbulence itself, but it's much more to act with yesterday's logic. So that's why we are trying to innovate at Neoma. And we have developed a couple of pedagogical tools. And here are two examples of them. The first one is concerning our virtual reality business case. And we do believe that learning is definitely experience. And if you do something else, you are just transmitting information. And if you only focus on information, well, let's say that the internet is going to be far better than you because it's going to be available every hour's day and every day a week. And it's going to be also much more accurate than every learning session you could have. And so that's why we do believe in technology to augment pedagogy. So how these VR business cases are running. First of all, we are thinking much more in terms of skills, and we want to develop the skills like individual critical analysis, but we also want our students to be able to come to a consensus as a group on 3 key issues, for instance, concerning a downtown retail shop. But we are running also this kind of virtual reality-based case study on a supply chain management context. And we want our students to be able to propose solutions to the issues that we are presenting to them in virtual reality. That means, first of all, our students are immersed in a context, and they can go all around as they want on their own to discover and to observe what's happening in this context. And then, of course, they have to set up this individual critical analysis, and then to come to a more classical or traditional work group. What kind of results do we have with this kind of technology? First of all, we are canceling the learning routine. That means when I'm announcing as professor that we are going to run a virtual reality-based case study, students are amazed by that. I mean, they don't really know what to expect, and they are really focused on the class, because it's not a class like the others. Then we also have this physiological commitment. That means, on the contrary than a traditional case study, with VR, students are immersed in a context, and you are showing directly to the brain what's happening in a context, and that's very powerful in terms of experiential learning. And it works really good because we have measured what are the impacts on this commitment, physiological commitment, and things are running just as if you were there. I mean, on the marketing VR case study, they are discovering what is a downtown retail shop. On the supply chain VR case study, they are discovering what is this stockage area and how it works. That's very interesting. The other results is that they can develop the ability of analyzing a whole system. I mean, on the contrary than a traditional case study, where you are telling students what is the context and then giving figures and then maybe some interviews from the CEO, the chief marketing officer, and so on. That's very highly structured. There, you only say, okay, you are now the head of the retail shop, for instance, and they have to make all this work on critical analysis and then teamwork. So that's very interesting because it's exactly the same way it's running in the real life. So we are putting all these experience directly into the classroom. We can import all these relevant managerial contexts into the classroom, and of course to have very short cycles between the theory and the actions and the decision process directly into the VR context. We also we are also developing the individual experience of the situation and the ability to work as a group, because one of the really funny things with these VR case studies and the first step of individual critical analysis is that our students are discovering that their neighborhood doesn't necessarily think the same way as themselves. And the part of the teamwork is very essential to help them to understand how to come to a consensus on this analysis. So definitely using this kind of technology helps us to go from knowledge to skills and competencies in action. And that's very, very interesting. Here are some facts and figures. I'm going to be very fast on that, but we have deployed this technology into the classrooms since July 2016. We have right now 2 VR-based case studies, one in marketing and the other one in supply chain management. That means more than 3,600 students that already have used that kind of technology. We also have more than 500 VR cardboards available, 10 faculty members on board on this kind of technology, because you also have to onboard faculty members and to explain them how this is not only technology, but a real pedagogical tools. And definitely this is a good pedagogical tools. The good news for the one who could be interested by that is that we are making all these virtual reality case studies available for partners and other business schools, either in France or worldwide. And well, simply ask if you want to have some access to that. We have won quite a lot of innovation awards, and I won't go through the list. And we also plan to get a new VR business case study concerning much more topic around HR and organization in September this year. So on that, we are not anymore on experiments, but we are developing a quite good expertise on the use of virtual reality technologies for education. And that's very, very interesting on what's happening on the learning side. The other topics and the other examples I've had for you concerning digital transformation at Neoma Business School is this time much more concerning big data. And a very important data available for us, which is the data from our alumni profiles. At Neoma, we've got around 65,000 of alumni in the network. With the system we have developed, we have been able to gather around 45,000 profiles and all the data from these 45,000 profiles. So that means around 70% of accurate data concerning our alumni. So we got a lot of up-to-date and accurate data concerning them. What can we do? First of all, we can have some KPI on what's happening through the schools and for our alumni in terms of professional trajectories. Of course, we can get some information on their current position, on their current job domain, on their declared skills, on their current country where they are working, in which companies, with what kind of functions, are they entrepreneurs, and that's very useful for a lot of use, for instance, rankings. But we also can have some geographical data for our from our alumni network, and that's very useful if we want, in terms much more this time in marketing, to identify the right profile in the right company with the right function in the right country, and that's very, again, very useful, you know, to focus directly on the right person available in the network. Another topics I really like on the analytics part of the tool is to try to identify what we call weak signals. And concerning the analysis of huge amount of data, it's very interesting to be able to identify what are the new jobs, what are the jobs of the future. And for instance, we are trying to set up the good algorithms to identify these weak signals. And for instance, we can identify who in our networks of alumni is working around artificial intelligence. And that's very useful, you know, just to check if what you are proposing as a school is definitely relevant according to the job market. So these tools is very useful on the analytics side. But we also have a student's side, and this is like a GPS, but for professional trajectories. And for our students, it's a really different interface, and the use case is always the same. The first question from our student could be, well, I have no idea of what I could do afterwards and after Neoma Business School, and what can I do with my diploma, and then how to achieve that goals. Well, the GPS that is running on the alumni data is going to ask, and for instance, let's imagine that Sarah, this student, is wondering about what she could do as first job. And then you got this kind of information on the interface. As a first job, Sarah could go on management and consulting trajectories, or much more in domains concerning sales and marketing, or in banking and finance, or in advertising, or in IT and information system, or all the others trajectories available and shown by the alumni data. And then the students can ask herself, well, do I really want to focus on where all the Neoma students are going in terms of management and consulting, or do I want to make more exotic thing and to try to find my own way? And of course, she could click on this more area and more domain to check. And let's imagine that Sarah has clicked on information technology and internet system. Then she can discover what kind of function or jobs are available for her. And she could be project manager, consultant, community manager, and so on. And then she could also click on this different function and then get access to a list, an accurate list of actual alumni that hold this position in the different companies. And then, of course, she can go back and to try another trajectory and to identify this way what could be the good job for her, and also to identify people and alumni to talk with because they have already made that professional trajectories. So this is the students' part of this big data on the alumni data. All this technology for students is available online through web and mobile, of course, through our Neoma Business School mobile application. But we are making all of this also available right in the campus through these different kind of device that we are calling pods. And all these are connected pods that allows to propose right in the physical space a good access to all the digital environments proposed to our students at Neoma. But of course, we want to go further than this, because digital transformation in a business school is not only a matter of technology or tools. I do believe that it's also a matter of cultures. And our belief is that we need to hybrid the different cultures. And of course, we have at the heart in our DNA the business culture, but we need to hybrid these cultures with also the technological and digital cultures, but also the culture from art and design. And that's why we are thinking all our solution in terms of digital transformation through these three pillars in terms of cultures, and we look forward to hybrid all these cultures also for our students and right in the class. Well, that's it for me, and I'm hanging back the voice to Paul for the Q&A session right now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Chris. That was fantastic. So we've had lots of questions come in. So I'm going to put the first one to you, Alan. So the question is, what are the challenges of using virtual reality and how can they be overcome?
Well, the biggest challenges concerning VR is to have all the materials available. I mean, one of the key topics is to get all these VR headsets available for all of your students. But when you got this, you need to onboard faculty members, because that's very important to help professors to understand what is the real help of this technology and how it is augmenting pedagogy. And that's very interesting, because we have ran scientific studies concerning the effects of VR on learning. And what is interesting is that students are learning without thinking they are learning. I mean, as they are immersed in a business context, of course, that has been designed to be relevant for them, they are, just running and having more experience in that context. And what is also interesting is that VR is not replacing the professor, because as professor with VR, you are much more on a role of being a mentor, on helping students to connect the dots between the different kind of experiences they have through the VR headsets, and to you are much more here also to help them to think about this experience. So here are some of the key challenges, but that's not so hard to do it. Then you also have the part of producing VR content. And of course, this is not really common right now, but you need to think this content, this pedagogical content, and to design it as like an in-between a game and also a movie. But well, if you got someone interested in that, we can discuss much more on how to overcome this. But here are the three key challenges between VR and VR business case.
Thank you, that's fantastic. So I've got a question for you, Chris, and the question is, what was the most difficult part of building Ask LU?
Well, I think one of the most difficult parts was engaging the university stakeholders, the kind of paymasters, as I call them, because voice and chat are quite a new technology. And just phrasing this nicely, some of our sort of senior managers and academics didn't really understand why that was required and whether that was a good investment. So that was one of the challenges, and one of the reasons that it took a little bit of time to actually get the money flowing and be able to start developing. I think the other one would be deciding on the best cloud technology approach to use. There's a few different ways. There's a school of thought that says, well, we just get our university data and we'll put it all out in the cloud and we'll use it and it'll be great. University was a little bit more risk averse than that, and that's why, as hopefully I highlighted in the presentation, we took an approach where we kind of called back to our local services and accessed them in that particular way. So there were some sort of technological challenges there, but I think the main challenge was kind of getting people on board, seeking investment, and actually getting the momentum to get started on doing something.
Thank you. So I'll keep with you, Chris. I've got another question. What has been the feedback from the student users of Ask LU?
The feedback has been really positive. We've got some, I didn't have a chance to show you some of the usage metrics, but we can track how many people are using it through the app and how many people are using it on devices. When we first started, the majority of people using it through their mobile phones, and over time, people starting using it on smart speaker devices. Pretty much universally positive feedback. Students really like that kind of chatty, ask a question however you like and get the answer. And that's one of the reasons that we're actually starting to lay down some of the more traditional interfaces. And for example, in our new build of our mobile app, we've included LU in there so that you can chat to it at any point during the app and kind of ask it your questions. So it's been really positive. The other thing that's happened is that's caused staff to get interested, and now we've got a huge big list of development requests, but we're working through those.
Thank you. So a question for Alan. Do you have partners to help deliver the technology?
Yes and no. Of course, we got partners around this technology, and it's much more a partnership on designing the VR content, but designing the business case is on the professor side. Concerning these partners, this is the part of the yes. And concerning the no, this partner was in our NEOMA environment and ecosystem, so that was quite easy for us, even as a business school, to find this technological partner. So I mean, that's a point which is really interesting, because it's not because we are a business school that we cannot find very easily some kind of technical partner and innovative partner. So that's a nice part of the story.
Thank you. Another question for you, Alan. What are the next steps for VR? Have you got any more exciting plans in the pipeline?
Yeah, in terms of development concerning VR, we have this third VR-based case study on HR and organization, and we are making it much more interactive and also very interesting in terms of data analysis. I cannot say more about that, but you will see that in a couple of weeks in September.
Thank you. So one for you, Chris. How does the speech recognition deal with accents?
So the speech recognition is built into the Amazon cloud platform. To me, the feedback has been good. We've had students from many different diverse backgrounds using it. At the moment, it responds to English speech, but I've seen people from a huge range of international backgrounds using it. We have some academics with very heavy sort of Scottish accents, which can be quite difficult to understand. And the recognition is high. And that's one of the reasons that at the start of the presentation, I kind of said, we're almost at a sort of tipping point where the technology at one point wasn't so good. It would have lots of recognition issues, but I'm sure as people are finding with their devices at home, the recognition is now there. And that's also another benefit of building it in a cloud platform, because as the technology and the recognition improves, and as new features such as multi-language support come out, we can start to make use of those as soon as they're there. But the recognition, I think, is really good, and certainly we've had good feedback on that.
Fantastic. So another question for you, Chris. Are you looking into how this app might be able to be used for student recruitment?
Aha, interesting. Yes, our student recruitment colleagues have been talking to us about that. We did think actually initially about developing an app for recruitment, and I know of other universities that are developing such an app. So the answer really is, currently, we're not looking at that. We're looking at expanding it for our existing students and making it much more useful. But certainly the technology lends itself to that. And one of the things I maybe didn't have a chance to mention is the skill is actually available in two flavors. It's the same skill, but it can be accessed by people who don't have a Lancaster University account. So they can ask for general information about Lancaster, the surrounding area, what the university is like. So it does already have a bit of usefulness in marketing and recruitment. But I'm sure if people were looking to do that, the technology does lend itself to that. And actually people coming out of high schools and secondary education are used to using these kind of technologies. So it's another good string in the marketing bow, I think.
Excellent. So another question for you, Alan. How do you train professors to use the technology, and is it difficult to get them on board?
Well, first of all, I do believe that the best way to show and teach the teacher and to use this kind of technology is to make them experience it. So as a first round of information, of course, we have made a lot of information around our VR-based case study. But then we have organized some groups of professors to demonstrate the technology and to run the case study. Our goal, we have had two main goals behind that. The first one was, of course, onboarding and explaining how it's running, how it works, what are the positive side of this use of technology. The other goal was much more concerning developing new ideas in terms of new kind of business case. And that works pretty well because we have right now around a bit more than 10 professors on board on this, and that means every year something like 1,300 of our students that are using this technology. And of course, the onboarding is going to develop that as we are going to also to develop the different disciplines the VR is used, and the next one is in HR and organization, and I do believe that we will have more faculty members. So information, experience on that, and then the last good action for onboarding was to provide help during the first session of this professor using VR technology. So there were someone of my team from the Learning Lab of Neoma Business School that was in the classroom helping the professor to set up the VR case study and to set up the 5 to 10 first minutes of the class.
Thank you. Got another question. I think it leads quite nice into this question. What is the production time to produce a virtual reality case?
Well, it really depends on which is the day zero, as said Chris. If you are putting the day zero on when I got as professor an idea of what I could do in terms of business case using VR to the availability of the VR applications in the classrooms, we have made a journey of around 12 months. But for the first one. But now, of course, we are much more faster concerning these topics because we've got experience on that. And I mean, we have learned from our errors or from our mistakes of the two first case study. You can go down on a time of, let's say, maybe 4 to 6 months around, but it takes time not on the production process, but much more on the designing process, because again, you need to design your case study to be highly adapted to the VR technology, and let's say to tell a story in an immersed world, and you need to design all of that to make sense for students and to be efficient in terms of learning.
Thank you, excellent. I think we've got time for one more question, and I'll put it to both of you. So we'll get Chris's answer first. So Chris, do you have any predictions of the future of technology and IT, especially within business schools and universities?
I definitely do. I think we're going to see a lot more moves to online teaching and to technologies that support that, including things like VR. I think AI and sort of prediction type technologies are going to form a big part of the future, being able to help students along that journey and to be a lot more flexible. If we're thinking that students are going to sit in lecture theatres in rows of seats and watch content, I think we are deluding ourselves.
Okay, and Alan, have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
I do agree with Chris. I mean, if you are thinking in terms of learning, I do believe that experiential education, first of all, and then adaptive learning are really two massive and huge transformation in our area. And that's why VR and AI are two key technologies to explore. And the thing is that if you want to be successful as a business school on these different kind of technologies, you need to move on the curve. I mean, and I really enjoyed the presentation of Chris because he has begun all the story with something very simple. And then he has enhanced all of these voice skills, and that's really the way to do it. And we did exactly the same way concerning VR. Our first version of the application was very, very simple with only one immersive context, and then we have enhanced the case study and making it a real complex case study. So don't be afraid to go on the technological curve and to learn on that curve. That's very important, to avoid to be disrupted.
Excellent, fantastic. So just before we go, I'd like to thank you both again for 2 fantastic presentations. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. We have another session taking place at 3:30 BST, and that's with Instructure, and they'll be discussing technology as an enabler in management education and a supporter of lifelong learning. So I've dropped the link inside the chat function, so if anyone would like to join that session, you can use the link and it will redirect you to the booking page. You can also go to our website and you can book directly from there. All unanswered questions will get passed through to the speakers, so don't worry, they'll be in touch with their answers to your questions. But yeah, lastly, thank you, Chris and Anna, for some fantastic presentations, and hope to see everyone soon on a new on another webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.